Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Under the Hood with Timmy. And we've had a lot of requests on doing more than just engine guys, fabricators, body men, mechanics. So I'm going to accommodate everybody with I'm excited to have my new guest here, Mr. Jim Davis from Commerce, Georgia, Vintage Metalworks.
That's right.
Is what he calls his deal. And so without any further ado, Jim and I met on a project that was brought to our attention by, I'd call it a mutual friend, or people was looking and they were wanting to it was supposed to be the real car, right?
That's right.
The Rossi, the 305 motor,
The
right?
305 motor, the car that was running the 71 Daytona race.
And so that was our first project together, and I'd never met or even knew about Jim's works or whatever he was involved with, but we became really good friends. Probably a 1 or 2 year deal, wasn't it? It seemed like it was a long time.
I would say about a year and a half.
But we immersed ourselves in it and basically give ourselves away. And I feel like that, with me doing the engine, you doing some of the body work and fabrication, throughout many other people, like another friend of ours, Carl Gerst, where's he out of?
Carl's out of Burlington, Iowa.
And so he was doing suspension stuff, and they've had multiple amount of people helping on that project throughout the years. But anyway, we've branched off and moved forward, and I feel like we hit all the marks on the 305 engine.
Absolutely.
And you helped with the engine mounts and a lot of the fabrication that most people wouldn't even know what was going on there, right?
You gave me the template for the motor plate, and we built the motor plate down at my shop. And
because they took a Hemi right out and put
the 305.
Put the 305, and that all came out of Keith Black's in California.
All that came out of the Trans Am program, and it was one of the first small blocks to use a dry sump system because they were converting over.
Right.
You had shared that with me before, that as late as '68, that Chrysler was looking to, they knew that the shelf life on the Hemi was coming to an end, and they were looking at how are they going to bring that small block.
And a lot of the guys that like some of the old Chrysler engineers, the guy at Aviade, the oil pump, who was supposedly a part of that, Keith Black, which I can't confirm or deny that, but a lot of people helped us with information, and we all shared that collectively, and it was a good project. I had a lot of fun, and it's like you said, had we not done that project, we would probably not be friends to this day.
I think it's one of those things in life when you took a bad situation and you made the best out of it.
Right.
And it just works out, and
it was cool.
Yeah,
and we ran it on a dyno with the group that was with us at the time, and had a little what was it, Jersey Mike's party or something?
Right,
yeah,
that's
right.
But
it was a lot of good times. But since then, before we go there, I'd like to. The other thing I want to bring up is that you had the original wooden buck or fabricating tool that Chrysler had to make all the nose pieces out of steel, but you had to surround it with that, and maybe you could explain that.
It was just a wooden form that was almost a pre-qualifier, and a friend of mine who's since passed, Jack McKay, he had that tool, and when he passed, I had the opportunity to get the tooling, and we had to satisfy some of the debt that Jack had at the time, and we learned how to build the Superbird noses because there were none that resisted. The only thing that was out there at the time were fiberglass.
Right. If you tried to restore or replicate one,
that's right. So
no, I always thought that was pretty interesting too. So
building a nose cone, the best way I can describe it, it's like putting a puzzle together in the dark. The first time you build it, you have no idea what you're doing, and you really don't. There's no roadmap.
Really?
No. So it's like putting together a puzzle. And that's the best way I can describe it.
Well, obviously, you didn't start out life just starting working on Superbirds. You had started restoring cars let's go back to some of your background, and let's go to the early Jim Davis life, if you don't mind.
Machining, tool and die. I've worked for Gulfstream Aerospace in the 80s, and I was fortunate enough to go back to work for Pratt & Whitney. And when I was at Pratt & Whitney, I went through their engineering program. And from there, when I moved to Atlanta, I went to work for Fire and Missile Control. And I've always kept the hobby. Cars were always a hobby for me. And about 20 years ago, my wife, I gotten tired of the corporate. I had a very good position, senior position, and I just didn't want to work for anybody anymore. And so I decided that I would start my own business. And I realized when I got into the business very early that most people that were building cars or working on restoring cars, it was glorified body work. It wasn't
Parts change.
yeah, I mean, and there's a difference in building a car and just cladding a car with parts.
And there's certainly no disrespect by you saying that, and I appreciate it. So it's safe to say that you started building your cars from a machining background.
Absolutely, everything that we do is based off of
Gotcha.
Machine shop setups, and I didn't have any predispositions about how a car should be built because I didn't know any better.
Yeah, and no, that's a good statement. But I guess from talking to you in the past, like some of the background from the machining process that you learned by doing the nose cones
Absolutely. Again, it's a process.
and the tolerances that you guys kept is just it's really, I think today's standards of building engines and whatnot, it's just now got to that and you guys, you were immersed in that.
Absolutely.
And so
You
give
did.
us a little stories about that of ceramic stuff.
When I worked at Fire and Missile Control, we were supplying parts to both the Patriot Advanced capability and the Aegis class destroyer missile
Right.
systems, and we were holding tolerances that are measured in microns.
So I can't even wrap my head around that, but go ahead.
So you learn, it's a different world. You learned how to establish a process and a process that's repeatable, and you have to break it out just like you do anything. When you break an engine apart, it's all built to the components. So you have to put it together, but each component has to stand on its own merit, and that's the way I build a car. I build
And
it
it was
off.
sort of off the frequencies and all that stuff.
Yes, the first missile noses that we were involved with,
Obviously, they missed the tolerances.
they didn't know any better. So the missile noses themselves were we measured the electrical value,
Right.
and the electrical value correlated to a wall thickness, a correlation.
This is way
Ba-
above my pay grade, by the way.
Based on the bulk density of the material, the dielectric constant of material, and so they were custom tuned, if you want to say it like that,
Yeah.
to a particular nose. No two are alike.
Right.
It's like no two engines you've ever built.
So
are
for
alike.
it to get its radar trace on something, all
That's
that
right.
had to be dead on.
Well, anytime you put a radio wave through any solid object, you have a certain amount of loss in that radio transmission and a certain amount of deflection, and you have to compensate for that.
So, out of curiosity, because I mean my mind's reeling with that whole story, but how much better did you guys make it by improving on your process and all that? You know, as far as the accuracy of the shot.
Oh, it uses kinetic energy on the Patriot Advanced Capability 3. They use, it's a hit to kill. It uses kinetic energy. It's like shooting an arrow at an arrow.
So, but you increased it by
Yes.
tenfold. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
to use some layman terms here, you know, because what you're talking about is it's going, you know, it's like fireworks in my head right now.
No, it certainly made it more reliable, more accurate, and again, we refined the process. And the only reason why I decided to leave there is because I wanted to work for myself.
Right.
So and with the blessing of my wife, we started our business. And
How many years ago was that?
That was 16 years ago.
Okay, congratulations on that.
And so you leave everything that you know, and you go chasing a dream.
So moving forward, you've bought it, which by the way, Jim owns an old Chevrolet dealership,
That's right.
and it's really cool to go in and see how he's got it all laid out and kind of in a garagey way. And it's like you said, it's my tree house. I'll invite who I want, and I always like that perspective on it. But the cool part about it is that here you are, and you're basically knowing nothing about putting bodies on cars, right?
I didn't have any preconceived ideas.
Other than, you know, your background, which I don't mean this offensively, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, you start doing it, you immerse yourself in it, and you realize, like you said earlier, that people are just doing it a little bit differently, and maybe not the path you wanted to go in. And after a few mistakes, a little school of hard knocks, so to speak.
And that's how we met. We went. I mean, our relationship blossomed after. Okay, we had our first date with
Yeah.
on the Rossi car.
Yeah.
It didn't go as well, but I've told you on
Well,
many occasions I would do it all over again.
But you say that, and I say that, but we found out about each other through mutual friends.
Absolutely.
And as we've talked, and you asked me early on what I'd be interested in doing, which what we're going to talk about here eventually, is some of the projects that we have to this day that we've worked on, and some of the restorations and replications and whatever, however you want to say that. But
I think with what you bring to the table and your knowledge of engine and just the whole entire being here at the facility and just being a part of what we do, I just think it galvanizes the whole process. Anybody who really wants a Superbird or a Daytona build,
right?
Why wouldn't you want a Petty to build the engine? Why wouldn't you want somebody like that to be involved with it? And to me, it's we complement each other.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, but I guess what I was trying to get to is you've learned by doing.
Absolutely.
And you got to see. Well, we'll put some of the pictures of Jim's project, and a guy took you a card, and you took him like 4 pieces that were the original that he could actually use.
That's right.
And everything else had to be redone. So that's how deep Jim goes. And I told you early on, I said, there's nobody that I know of in this country, maybe even the world, that does it as deep in the fabricating process of any old car, whether it be, because you've done Camaros. And when I first met you, you were doing some sort of
did Mustangs that had several
Pro Mod Mustangs
that went over to England.
That you did all the science on the suspension and basically took other people's
components and put them in, and it just again, it's part of the process of learning, and you just learn and you just continually move forward.
And moving forward, you've now recently got involved with Art Morrison, and we've talked about Carl, because Carl's got his own, or had his own brand. He sold out.
He sold out QA1.
But still, it's still basically his design.
His design
of suspension. Because there's several. Because you and I went to Carlisle one year, and I opened my eyes, and all the stuff that how the stock cars actually bolt together from the ground up. In which we have another friend, Dave Wise, who we've done some stuff with collectively.
Right.
And you guys bring an awareness to, I guess, numbers matching, so to speak.
When Dave Wise, Dave works for Barrett. He's one of the foremost in the country as far as knowledge on Chryslers. He's highly sought after. He's highly respected.
Well, and I'm talking about from the fasteners to the little marks on the car.
Absolutely.
And so I told him right off the bat, I didn't mean nothing bad, but I'm not a numbers matching guy usually. I'm going to modify it or try to make it better or make it faster or whatever. I mean, but he knows things that I never even thought about as how the factory did things, the process.
Dave's like an archaeologist or a paleontologist. He's on that level, and
well, you are too.
What he brings to thank you, but what he brings to the table is, it's just another component. You're only as good as people that you work with.
Well, and some of the stories that he's told with us together, it's just like, it'll blow your mind. And I had no idea that he's as deep as he goes.
Oh, yeah.
And that, when you're talking millions of dollars for an automobile,
yes,
you have to be on the up and up. And you're not going to get nothing by him from what I've learned from Dave.
No,
so.
It's like CSI with Dave. He's just he's on that level.
Well, and so I'm gonna, like I said, I knew I'd be all over the board with you because there's a lot of stuff that we could talk about. You've done not only Superbirds and Dodge Daytonas, which is the wing cars, which I think that's kind of what brought us together, because you really loved them, and you knew by talking to me that I love them.
Right.
And obviously we've got a few photos of these out on front here, or
in the diecast here. I mean, it's part of your family.
Yeah.
You know, and cars were purpose built. It to me, it's a time when automobile manufacturers they really believed in their edict that you build a car that would run a race, and that galvanized the public. They had to go out and buy one. You know, Plymouth never wanted to build a Superbird, but the only reason why they did is because to get your uncle to come back, because he had gone over to Ford.
Right, and it was only a brief.
It was a brief marriage, but nonetheless, I mean,
it's funny we're talking about this because I've had several people that we talked to about that 69, 70 transfer, and it's really interesting, all the stories from the people that were involved that's still living, and I love to hear the stories.
The Superbirds would have never come about had your family decided to go with.
They would have just stayed with the Dodge Daytona.
But Plymouth, from what I understood, from what I've read, is that your uncle, your family. I won't say necessarily your uncle, but they were all. They were Plymouth people, and there was a big segregation between the Dodge brand and the Plymouth brand, and Petties were considered Plymouth people,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be heresy to put your uncle in a Dodge.
Well, I think through the eventuality of it, as years passed, and obviously they merged with Dodge, Plymouth, whatever.
Right.
But
Yeah.
no, it's always interesting to hear somebody else's view and what you've read, and obviously you're pretty heads up on it, and appreciate your perspective on it.
Well, think about how much the car has changed NASCAR. NASCAR changed the homologation rule. It went from 500, which is what the Charger 500 started out as a designate. You had to build, these number of units to qualify. Then it proceeded with the Daytona, and all that came out of the Chrysler engineering that was over there in Huntsville, Alabama, because the Apollo program was shutting down. They had all these people that didn't have anything to do.
Really?
Yeah.
So that was actually had a factory in Huntsville.
Well, the Chrysler was involved in the rocket technology over there,
which intertwines with what we're
Absolutely.
talking about. I had no idea.
Absolutely.
So I was reading something, and the last of the Superbirds actually come off the line. It's sometime in October or sometime in 1969.
They were all built.
So they were all built that year for the 70 year.
Had to qualify as a 70.
So all this was in the works for well over a year
Absolutely.
from reading that and
No
what
doubt.
you're saying.
No doubt.
Wow, that is interesting.